Now, there is a view in Hong Kong that Hong Kong did well in the period before 1997 because it was smart, because it was clever, because it was free, because it could get on with it, because it was with the British and so on. Now, I think that for the great part, this is a serious misinterpretation of history. Hong Kong did well between the late 1970s and the handover in 1997 because it got lucky. What do I mean by that? It got lucky because China in 1978 started to open up bit by bit, step by step. It didn't open up fully until after the WTO agreement in 2001. So while it was still opening up in a piecemeal fashion, Hong Kong could take on some of the functions that otherwise China would have done. It would have like the front office in some senses for China. And so Hong Kong was the beneficiary of being able to do these things. One of these things, of course, was that if you were a Western firm, a European firm, an American firm, a Japanese firm, and a Korean firm, and you wanted to access the Chinese market, the easiest stopping point initially was to do it from Hong Kong. So it wasn't that they were very smart, it was that they got lucky. They got lucky not because of the British, they got lucky because of China and the role that China was performing. Now, of course, after WTO, then China increasingly, I mean, if you wanted to open up in the Chinese market, why would you go to Hong Kong? It became irrelevant. If you want to open up in the Chinese market, go to Shanghai, or go to Beijing, or go to Guangzhou, or go to Shenzhen, wherever you wanted to go. But you wouldn't, by and large, choose to stay in Hong Kong. So the raison d'etre, the cause of Hong Kong's relative success in that period, disappeared. And Hong Kong had to find a new role in the period after 1997. So it wasn't China's fault that this happened. This was a change of circumstances in the relationship between China and Hong Kong. Now, another reason that the period since 1997 has been criticised, particularly by the British, say the former governor of Hong Kong, Chris Patten, would say, China's not been true to democracy and so on. Now, this, in my view, this is British hypocrisy. Britain ran Hong Kong for 155 years. And I'll tell you something, there was never a semblance of democracy. Did they ever introduce universal suffrage? Did they ever talk about universal suffrage? Not a word of it until after the handover agreement, and then with Chinese rule looming, then it became essential that Hong Kong was democratic in a Western style fashion. This was hypocrisy. How should Hong Kong try and proceed now? Now, I think a word of criticism here of the Chinese government and its handling of Hong Kong. I think that one country, two systems, which was a brilliant solution to the problem of Hong Kong, a civilization state solution to the problem. A nation state would never think of those terms in those terms. But what is one country, two systems? How do you create the balance between the two? The project in the longer run is clearly to create a more unified country. It's not to just keep the two places entirely separate. And I think one of the difficulties that China has had is that initially its reaction to the handover, remember this is 1997, this is China just turning outwards into the world. There was a lot of publicity questioning about how China will conduct itself as the force behind Hong Kong and so on. And so I think that China's natural instinct in that period, an understandable instinct, was to emphasize two systems. I mean, I remember when I lived in Hong Kong for 2.5 years, soon after the handover, and I remember being surprised that the only evidence, virtually, of any Chinese presence, visible presence in Hong Kong was one Chinese flag flying over one of the buildings near the harbour. There was just no evidence. Essentially, there was not much change. It just carried on in the old form. And there were two big problems with this. One, the governance of Hong Kong is a colonial governance. It's set up in a colonial manner. It's a kind of executive. There's no political leadership. There's no political sense of direction set by a colonial administration, because that's not the job of a colonial administration. That would have been done back in London in those days. But basically the form of government has stayed more or less the same as it was previously. And the second problem is about the economy. Now, contrary to the way in which the British have historically liked to talk about Hong Kong as this dynamic, competitive economy, by and large, that is just rubbish. Hong Kong is a typical colonial economy. It is not a competitive economy. It's a monopolistic economy. It basically preferred or empowered the tycoons to run Hong Kong, to divide up the spoils between themselves, above all in the field of property where most of the money was made. So this is an oligopolistic and monopolistic economy. That had to be changed. That has to be changed. But unfortunately, not nearly enough change has taken place. So my criticism of the Chinese government, it needs to break the situation in Hong Kong, to allow Hong Kong to go forward. It needs to change those two situations, to have a different sort of administration and to have a different kind of economy, which is more open. Now, let me finish by saying, compare the fortunes of Hong Kong with Shenzhen. Deng Xiaoping deliberately suggested the idea of Shenzhen just over the border, a little fishing port, so it was close to Hong Kong and could model itself and learn some of Hong Kong's lessons. Now compare the situation of Hong Kong today with where Shenzhen today. Shenzhen has made absolutely electrifying progress. It is the technological centre probably of China. It is the second only to Silicon Valley in its technical competence and innovation. And Hong Kong? There's nothing like that in Hong Kong. Hong Kong has made zero, they talked about it, but it's made zero progress in this direction. I think that the Hong Kong people should press the Chinese government for more rapid integration in China's own plans. So that Hong Kong, rather than just thinking of itself as apart from China, it needs to think of itself more in terms of being part of China. But, you know, the mentality of the people is we're different, we're not Chinese. Well, of course, for 155 years, they never learned anything about China. They speak Cantonese, sure, but they didn't know anything really about China. They were ignorant about the North. Their lines of vision were all westwards to Britain or the West or the United States later or Canada, etc., and never north to China. The fundamental problem about Hong Kong is that it was a British colony for 156 years. That's a long time. It means many generations of Hong Kong citizens lived under British rule. It means that during this period, by and large, Hong Kong was very estranged from China and extremely ignorant about China. I mean, I did debate in London 3 or 4 years ago with Anson Chan, who was the secretary, head of the civil service to Chris Patten when he was governor of Hong Kong. And I was shocked by her level of ignorance about China. Hong Kong is a Western-style society with Western ways of thinking and Western values. And you do not change that situation quickly. I mean, to be quite frank about it, even 50 years won't change many of those attitudes because they are deeply laid in the consciousness of the way in which Hong Kong people think. Now, it's certainly true that the West
has played a negative role in the period since the big extradition bill by basically serving, I think, as a cheerleader for those who opposed the Hong Kong government and opposed the Chinese government on Hong Kong. But I would urge you not to think the major cause of the problems in Hong Kong today essentially because of the Western role in the current situation. Because I think if you think that, you'll be looking in the wrong direction and not doing what we all need to do, which is to try and understand what's happening and therefore find a way of being able to deal with this successfully. The Hong Kong government has made two serious mistakes in this period. The first was the security law in 2003, which it withdrew after huge demonstrations. And the second big mistake was the introduction of the extradition bill recently, which, of course, also has been more or less withdrawn. Why were these mistakes? Look, there's a good case for the security bill. There's a very good case for the extradition bill. I do not deny that. Unfortunately, these both were a step too far for too many in Hong Kong. Now, there's no denying, in my view, that the big demonstration against the extradition bill represented a very big cross-section of Hong Kong society. And the problem is that then it gave encouragement to another position in Hong Kong society. And the different position is they want universal suffrage, and a section of them want independence for Hong Kong. And they are pursuing their objectives in a violent way which no government in an advanced country can tolerate. This is inexcusable. And I think one of the great tasks here is to find the ways to isolate these sections and move Hong Kong opinion away from that position. I mean, I really don't think these young, excuse the expression, kids represent the mainstream of Hong Kong opinion. I think it would be quite wrong for us to think in these terms. Now, this brings me to the deeper questions. I think that there's a feeling of displacement. Over in 1997, the Hong Kong economy was roughly 1/3 of the size of the Chinese economy. Today, it is less than 3% of the size of the Chinese economy. In other words, there's been an extraordinary shift in the center of gravity away from Hong Kong towards China. And it is stark, actually, for Hong Kong, because perhaps the best exemplar of this transformation in China is just over the border in Shenzhen, which in 1978 was just a fishing village. And Hong Kong was much richer and riding high and all the rest of it. And today, it's complete role reversal. Shenzhen is perhaps the most remarkable city in the world. In some ways, the most advanced city in the world. And what's happened to Hong Kong? I would suggest that by and large, the difficulty is that Hong Kong is relatively stuck. It did have a role, but it feels in many senses as if it's lost that role. So I think that if you want to understand the mentality of Hong Kong people at the moment, you've got to take into account all these kind of considerations. They feel, they're angry, they're frustrated, don't know where they're going. You've got a Hong Kong economy which is relatively stagnant, which has been unable to reinvent itself, and for certain sections of the population, conditions have got worse. Young people cannot ever afford, or vast majority can never afford to have property. So they feel embittered by this, and they feel that there isn't much of a future in that situation. If you think about China, what has transformed China over the last 40 years? Reform and opening up. That is the reason that China's been transformed. A remarkable vision, starting with Deng Xiaoping, with a constantly rolling process. You know, one of the wonderful things I think about reform and opening up is there's no end point. It keeps developing. And for Hong Kong, well, frankly, I don't know what the reform strategy is in relationship to Hong Kong. I don't really think there is one in the same way that there has been in China. But I think the most important single question for the Hong Kong government is a strategy of transformation of the socio-economic conditions in Hong Kong to give the people a sense of the future. I want to finish with 2 points. First of all, I want to congratulate the Chinese government and the Chinese people on their restraint in relationship to this question. And my very last point is this. You know, it's so obvious that Hong Kong's future is as part of China. I mean, what else can it be? I mean, you know, these kids are kind of out of their minds. You know, independent Hong Kong? Well, all your trade, everything is linked so profoundly to China. What are you going to do in that situation? Look west. I mean, look back to Britain. I mean, Britain's going through its biggest political and constitutional crisis for 200 years. I asked them, which planet are you living in? What do you think you're doing? China is the future for Hong Kong. And with those words, I finished. Thank you.
刚才马丁雅克先生他说这个西方势力的干预不是主因，对，但是我觉得西方势力的干预它发挥了一个主要的作用在里面。我们可能还是要做好心理准备，因为这些乱港分子和西方的反华势力的干预，它不会在一时一刻结束，它可能会延续一段时间，甚至可能会升级转换成其他的形式。第二就是我们还是对于香港要保持理性，要有充分的定力，也不要对香港地区的人民彻底的失去希望。其实中国革命一路走来，取得胜利的一大宝贵经验就是善于做群众工作，做好香港人民的这个群众工作，也是我们要努力的方向之一。这是我想分享的想法。I'm Luo Jun from China's Tsinghua News Agency. I'm one of the commentators here. I disagree with one of your points because you raised the point that Western intervention was not the main cause of Hong Kong's crisis here. But I think it's it played a main role in Hong Kong's crisis right now.
Of course, I accept the Hong Kong press, for example, which elements of which are Western. Has played a role. No question about that at all. So we're not in disagreement about that. But I don't think that what's happened in this period can really be ascribed mainly to Western intervention, because quite frankly, the West has been doing this pretty much ever since the handover. And why has the situation got much more difficult now? And I really think we need to look at the much deeper causes. There's always a danger of blaming someone else, and I accept that we can blame someone else, but that is not going to solve the problem. We have to, I say we, because I want to resolve this question, you know, in a Chinese way. We have to find a way to win over the hearts and minds of the Hong Kong population. That's the central issue, I think.
I totally agree with your last point. Okay.
香港一直都是中国领土的一部分，但为什么现在还存在港独？他们是为什么会有这样的想法产生呢？
刚才马丁讲了一点，我觉得值得我们注意的。他说，就是香港在英国统治下是156年，是好几代人啊，这好几代人是英国的殖民地的教育。那么他是不了解中国的整个的历史，更不了解中国的近代史。97年回归之后，我们一国两制，一国两制呢，实际上这治理是交给特区政府的，特区政府很多这个计划推不下去。那通识教育本来是这个很好的一个建议，董建华先生提出来的，但是遇到很多阻碍。那最后你发现教材里边都是这个贬低大陆的，你比方最典型的，一讲到大陆讲专制政府，都这样用，你知道吗？这个是西方典型的这种 写法口吻，这个没有改。但媒体也是，媒体一种是英美这个资本直接控制的，一种是香港资本力量控制的，几乎都是骂中国的。哎，中国的一个负面消息，它都是头版头条。哎，那千万也不要忘记，就是香港这么多年来，这个比方说土改时候地主，啊，这个社会主义所有制改造的时候资本家等等等等，他们都逃到香港。这些人他们对社会主义有仇恨，但他们的后代也没有完全转过来，它是个长期性的问题，我们解决的时候要有耐心。
I think it is very difficult for here in the PRC to understand the Hong Kong mentality, because the natural assumption is to think that you share quite a lot because they're Chinese and so on. But their whole way of thinking is so deeply imbued with Western values. And basically, you know, they've looked west, not north, for, you know, generation after generation after generation. They're not that interested in China. They don't want to be interested in China. I think here, a path, you know, encouraging them to go to Chinese universities, finding internships in Shenzhen and so on, paths for their careers and futures, much more directed towards China, would do a lot of good.
现在在网络上有一种说法，就是说，因为西方国家他们不太了解中国的成长，然后呢，因为他们在过去200多年的时间里面，他们是占主导的，所以他们觉得没有这个意识，没有这个必要去了解中国。然后现在的话，他们看不懂中国这种成长，所以呢，他们会尝试的做一切的努力去破坏可以让中国成长的事情。香港就是一个例子。我想问，就是马丁先生怎么看这个问题
？Well, I think that the Western attitude towards China has become more negative. I would say probably I would date it from around 2010, when China became more confident. The West had just had its worst financial crisis since 1931. It was feeling weakened by that. And China becomes more expansive in its attitudes. And I think since then, you've seen in the West, I think, a shift in the center of gravity of opinion in a more negative direction towards China. As far as Hong Kong is concerned, it's been incredibly negative towards the Hong Kong government. The British media has made absolutely no distinction, virtually no distinction at all, between the big, you know, peaceful demonstration against the extradition bill, which I think, you know, that was a perfectly legitimate demonstration, which was, you know, presented the feelings of many in Hong Kong, with these violent mob demonstrations and the destruction of property and the occupation and dislocation of the airport and so on. None of these Western governments would ever tolerate that kind of behaviour in their own societies. I mean, there was a demonstration, a women's movement on climate change, and they closed some roads in central London, and the media, particularly the right-wing media, went mad. And, you know, this was a completely peaceful demonstration. But when it comes to Hong Kong, oh yeah, you know, this is fine. So I mean, frankly, my attitude towards Britain and Hong Kong is, you know, what a bunch of hypocrites they are, because they're always criticising criticising the lack of democracy, or the eating away of democracy, or whatever they want to call it, in Hong Kong. Do you know, the British ran Hong Kong for 156 years, and they never introduced in that period the slightest vestige of democracy. And the Chinese the Chinese were going to be responsible for Hong Kong. Then they raised the issue of democracy. I used to know Chris Patten quite well, and I had a meeting with him in December 1994 in Government House, and I said to him, how do you think the Chinese feel that you now raise democracy, and for 150 years you never mentioned it? Don't you think they think you're hypocrites? And he gave some incredible answer. He said, "Oh, well, you see, that was, we were democratic." I said, "What do you mean, democratic?" He said, "Well, the governor of Hong Kong was selected by the British Parliament, and the British Parliament is elected." That was the most extraordinary reply, and it told you a lot about the attitude in the West towards democracy.
所以我补充一句，就是2012年，就是我们18大召开的前1天还是2天，我和马丁在伦敦，和这个陈方安生，还有一位就是反华的美国作家，我们2对2进行辩论。那个辩论题目呢叫做西方民主模式是否适合中国？所以这背后就是一个马丁前面讲到西方这个态度。那么我前面在演讲中我提到，就英国它是有这个传统的，它离开它的殖民地，它总是要留一点麻烦，埋一下地雷的。那背后呢，就是希望这个变成一个他们能够控制的这个地方。那么所谓这个多党民主制度，西方民主制度是它最容易控制，它要支持其中某一个党派，它就足够影响你的政治和经济。那么现在呢，他确实感到就是无望了。刚才他提的是2010年左右，他就西方这个梦想，或者我们叫颜色革命，在中国成功和平演变，这个几乎是不可能了。所以这个时候，他确实，我个人认为是加快了，就是这个在香港也好，其他地方也好，包括支持藏独、疆独、台独，全面加快了。某种意义上实际上反映了一种就是一种无奈，一种坦率的说是有点进退失据。你要看出他的急躁，他想不出其他办法，只能这样来。说我们该做什么做什么，然后香港的问题放在适当的这个位阶上把它处理好就可以了。有些问题短期可以解决，也需要长期的投入来解决，但可以解决的。
主持人好，两位老师好。我想问的问题就是，香港和澳门他们同样都是一国两制，为什么我们经常听到港独，却很少听到澳独？
这个澳门和香港很不一样，就是澳门的国家认同感要强得多，即使在回归之前也更强。一个重要原因是，就是当时这个葡萄牙政府他对澳门的管控比这个英国政府对香港的管控要松得多。一个是重要的问题是，澳门这个葡萄牙政府比较穷，他当时甚至我早就听说过，想很早就把澳门还给中国，后来我们说稍微等一点。那个，你比方举个简单例子，就是在澳门回归之前，他的学校小学、中学大部分已经挂中华人民共和国5星红旗，这个因为他从这个澳门政府拿不到多少钱，葡萄牙政府拿不到多少钱，但香港不是，9县大概只有不到10所的学校是挂5星红旗的，因为他这个港英政府他是通过一个拨预算的方法对小学、对中学给予资助的，然后如果你挂5星红旗，你就上了黑名单了，他找出各种冠冕堂皇的理由，不给你资助或者给你少的资助，所以多数这个他没有这个国家的概念。另外就是因为澳门它有这个更强的国家认同，它已经正式的通过了国家安全法，就我们讲的香港第23条、基本法23条，就你这个特区要制定自己的法律来保证国家安全，不能颠覆国家的安全。这条在香港一直没有落实，那么澳门就落实之后，一下子就关系就非常好处理。而且还有一个就是澳门在回归之前，他这个黑社会是非常厉害，黑帮社会弄得没有任何安全可言，天天都有枪击案。后来在中国人民解放军的帮助下，他粉碎了这些黑社会那么然后他跟中国大陆的经济合作也非常之好。原来他的人均 GDP 是香港的一半甚至不到，现在香港的1倍。所以在这么1国2制，如果我们真的有国家认同之后，是可以做得非常好的。那么香港始终没有做到。不同观点可以互相讨论辩论，就我们一点都不害怕竞争， 中国人你要自信。
大家知道，香港目前遇到的这么多的挑战，这么多的乱象，有香港社会本身的问题，但是也有幕后力量的推动，甚至我们去观察它，会发现很多力量已经跳到了台前，有越来越多的人能够看清楚。那这个问题的由来不是一天形成的，我想这个问题的解决也并不是一朝一夕之功。我们几位都已经提到了，我们可能需要有足够的定力，也需要有足够的心理准备。但是我想，我们今天在这里讨论香港，是因为我们发自内心的喜爱香港，甚至我们对香港依然充满了期待，期待在未来的某一天，我们的人们一定会有智慧可以解决